Hi, and welcome to our third in a new series of shows called Senior Moment. Glad you could make it today. Our show covers some of the moments in the community that relate to interesting issues that seniors would appreciate and enjoy. And one of those moments is my guest today, Mr. Jeff Trager from Jeff Trager
Presents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
And as you know, it'll just be a moment, and it'll seem like it went by so quickly that you wouldn't even remember it. But anyway, thanks for being here today.
Sure.
So some of our regular viewers would recognize you from previous shows that have been great shows where we talk about a lot of the things that you did back in the day with the music scene in San Francisco. And today we're hoping to maybe talk about some of the highlights of your storied career.
Well, there's been quite a few. There's very few artists that I really haven't worked with. I really wanted to work with Smokey Robinson, and I wanted to work with Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra. Those were three that I could think of. There was a few that I would have loved to, but Jesus, most I've been able to meet a lot of people. I personally have been able to. I met Eartha Kitt, spent time with Eartha Kitt and Bing Crosby. One night I was tending bar in San Francisco, and Tony Bennett knocked on the door, wanted to come in and have a few drinks. And
well, people remember Tony Bennett, but a lot of them don't remember Bing Crosby, and they remember Frank Sinatra. But how long did he keep performing? I mean, was he in
Bing?
Sinatra, was he still performing in the late 70s?
Well, I thought he went into the 80s. They did a Rat Pack, the end of it, it was just him and Dean Martin. They did a show at the Circle Star Theater. That was the last, one of the last thing that they did. But no, Frank started in the 30s. He was singing with the Tommy Dorsey band. I think that's where he got his start.
And that's where he got his style too, I think.
Yeah, what a style.
Yeah.
What a style. A friend of mine engineered his duets record that he did with all these different artists. And he said Frank came in and he had all these great studio musicians, and he would just come in, and you don't go into a room with Frank. You don't put him in the glass enclosed booth to sing. He goes and he sings right in front of the musicians. He'll do one, maybe two takes, and off he goes. He knows exactly what he wanted. He was just a perfectionist.
Yeah, the ultimate professional.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. And it was funny because when he wanted something, no one ever said no to Frank. But there was a guy named Gordon Jenkins who wrote a lot of stuff for him, and also he arranged orchestras for Frank, like Nelson Riddle did, and Count Basie. But when Frank wanted a sad song, he would call Gordon Jenkins, and he'd call Gordon at 2, 3 in the morning, and Gordon says, "Hey Frank, it's 2, 3 o'clock." I says, "I'm not coming over." He says, "I need a sad song. I need a sad song." And Gordon was one of the few people who would say no to Frank. It's just, Frank was something else.
Yeah, well, that's a very cool story.
Yeah. I have a friend who's engineer. Also produced the first 3 or 4 Jefferson Airplane records. Worked with Sam Cooke. He worked with Dinah Krall. He worked with Leanne Russell. He also engineered. Then he won 32 Grammys, or 33, because he also won a Grammy for the Pink Panther. He worked with Henry Mancini, which was really something, among others. And he the one who put together the Nat King Cole, Natalie Cole,
When they sang
Unforgettable.
together, yeah.
And he was the one who put it together.
That's
His
one of
name
my
is
favorite songs.
Al Schmidt, and he's an incredible human being. He's like 89 years old. He's still engineering and producing.
Wow.
Just did he just did Paul McCartney.
Well, you know, I haven't thought of Eartha Kitt or Leon Russell, a lot of those names, in a long time. But I remember both of them, and I really got into Leon Russell when he was performing.
Great writer. He was a great writer. We signed him to a label called Blue Thumb Records. We gave him his own label, and he came in with A Song for You. He did great. There's songs on it, and I said, "Who is this guy?" And then I went on the road with him. We did some shows with Joe Cocker, and he called it Mad Dogs and Englishmen.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so I was his promotion. I was his personal promotion guy, and I got to know him real well. And we'd go all up and down the coast, and boy, what a great time! He was an incredible writer.
Well, you know, a lot of that happened in the 60s, 70s, and a little in the 80s. And you wonder if those days will ever come back again. Because, you know, maybe they will, but, you know, the creativity of the artists back then, and, you know, it was the burgeoning of a new generation of artists.
Yeah.
And, you know, nowadays it's kind of like a rehash, some of the new people coming in. Or
Well, you look at Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars is, I'm not going to say he's ripping off, you know, other artists, but he's doing what James Brown did, but James Brown did it. There was the original that was James Brown. And then, of course, there was Jackie Wilson, Jackie Wilson was an absolute fantastic entertainer. And Sammy Davis Jr. was another one. But as time goes by, people forget just how great they were.
Yeah.
You know, with great entertainers. You know, Sammy could do, God, he was a great drummer, and he was a great dancer. And but as time goes by, you know, it diminishes, you know, what people remember. But there's a lot of great stuff going on. It's just different.
Yeah,
That's all.
To be fair.
I mean, I don't hear the songwriters like I used to. I mean, I don't hear a Paul Simon. I don't hear any Stevie Wonders, any Donny Hathaways. There's good ones out today. It's just different. That's all.
Yeah. Well, there's so many of them too that it's kind of hard to keep up with it.
Yeah. I can't, you know, I've mentioned this before, I can't listen to radio anymore. It's really difficult for me.
It's become so commercialized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then KFOG, didn't they close down?
KFOG closed down, yeah.
Yeah, that was a bummer.
Yeah. But you still got stations like KBLX, and they're still around. But there was, in the old days, in the 60s, there was a lot of different stations. There was K-Jazz.
I remember K-Jazz.
K-Jazz is no longer with us. There's KCSM today, which is still doing great stuff.
Is that out of Berkeley?
That's out of San Mateo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you can listen to them. That's a great station.
What was the jazz station in Berkeley?
KBLX KRE.
KRE?
KRE.
Because I remember being interviewed on that show one night with Doug
Henry. Your friend, Doug Henry.
And we were doing a promo piece for the Jazz Festival in Vallejo.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
That's a great station. They broke a record for me It was Keith Jarrett. Keith Jarrett, the piano player.
Yeah.
And he did an album called The Cone Concert, and there was a 3-minute track on there, and I took him the album and I said, there's 3 minutes that you can play on the radio, because they didn't like playing 10, 12-minute tracks.
Yeah.
But 3 minutes you can get by.
And then you get a commercial in.
Yeah, and so,
Yeah.
well, that's what it is. You know?
Yeah.
And so they started playing 3 minutes of this one song. I don't even remember the name of the song. And the next thing you know, the album just went from 5,000 copies to, Jesus, 300,000, 400,000. It was just amazing because it could get played. And
Yeah, I remember going to see him live at Northrop Auditorium, the University of Minnesota, in the 70s, the late 70s.
yeah.
And the guy was phenomenal.
Yeah, he was. He was a strange guy, but he really was a phenomenal piano player. I mean, when I walked up to him and I said, "My name's Jeff Trager, and I was responsible for that track on the Cone Concert," he just looked at me and he barely said thank you. It was like he's really introverted. He's really just. That's the way he is, you know. It's like Barry Bonds, you know. It's like he gets.
Yeah, somebody brought up the name Art Resnick the other day. Do you ever hear of Art Resnick?
No.
He was a jazz pianist. Well, anyway, same era as Jarrett, but
Well, you know, Keith Jarrett, Miles Davis used to put together these great bands, and he had a band with both Keith Jarrett and Chick Corea in the same band.
mm-hmm.
John McLaughlin, Jack DeJohnette,
Wow,
the same band.
yeah,
And they came into San Francisco. They played a club called Basin Street West. And Miles, the way he did things a lot was he'd come on the stage and he'd play for about 5 minutes and walk off. And then at the end of the set, he'd come back on, play 5 minutes, and that was it. But he had these incredible musicians that he would find.
Well, did Miles Davis start on the East Coast?
Miles?
Yeah, or was he out here?
Geez, I'm not sure where Miles was from.
'Cause I remember Mingo Lewis talking about Miles Davis and his parents in the Bronx.
Miles Davis changed music, especially when he did that album Kind of Blue, and he had Coltrane on there and Bill Evans, I believe. And but Carlos Santana told me something very interesting. He said, because I tried to sign Santana, and it just didn't work out. But later on, Carlos said to me, "I never would have signed with you guys." I said, "The only reason I signed with CBS was because of Miles."
Wow.
In fact, when Santana would do their shows, they would start off with a Miles Davis track, and then they would go into the bum 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 bum, and that's how much Carlos idolized Miles.
Yeah.
In a Silent Way. That was it. That was the name of it, the song.
In a Silent Way?
Yeah, In a Silent Way.
Wow.
Yeah, Miles was something else. I'd never worked with Miles. I just admired him. That was the first album I ever bought, was Kind of Blue.
It was?
Yeah. And the second one was Bobby Darin live at the Copa.
Wow. What a talent he was.
Bobby Darin was a great entertainer.
Yeah.
He died way too soon. He had a bad heart, and he died, I think, in his late 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah, he and Sinatra were sort of
Competing?
Yeah, well, Bob, I don't think Frank's competed with anybody. I mean, but Darin, and they had problems, you know, because Bobby Darin thought he was another Sinatra, which he wasn't. But he was. It's funny. I read the book about his life, Bobby Darin's life, and I wanted to do a movie. So I had a friend of mine who knew Mickey Rourke, and this was a young Mickey Rourke, and we had a meeting with Mickey, and Mickey kind of had that look of a Darin. Certainly not John Spacey. Had no, that was ridiculous, but we offered Mickey Rourke a sizable amount of money to do the movie, and then we got a call from Sandra Dee's attorney. We forgot that Sandra Dee was married to Bobby Darin.
So she had a little stake in the
She
financial
had a
outcome.
big stake. She says, who are you guys? I says, well, we're just a couple of guys from Marin County. And he says, you can't do anything with my ex-husband's. I own everything, Bobby Darin. She, at the time that they got married, she was the biggest female artist in the business. He married her. I think she was about 20 years old, but that put a stop to that.
Did Carlos live in Marin ever?
Oh yeah. He lived a long time in Marin. He lived up on Mount Tamalpais. He lived in San Rafael. Yeah.
Well, he lived in San Francisco for a while too, didn't he?
Well, when he moved from when his family moved from Tijuana, he moved to the Mission District, and went to Mission High School.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I knew Carlos from the neighborhood. I knew his roommate more than I knew Carl. I knew the other guys in the bands, but the only time that I ever got a chance to socialize with him is I went down to see a guitar player named Gabor Szabo who wrote a song called Gypsy 66, which is the second half of Black Magic Woman. And Carlos and I and Neil Schon, who was with Santana, and Michael Carabello, and they were all big fans of Gabor. He kind of got the idea for this song Gypsy 66 from the way that, because Gabor had a song called Gypsy 66, and
well, Linda Engelman, who was involved in the Democratic Party in Vallejo, claims that she used to babysit Carlos when he first came to San Francisco. And I hear stories from her about him and his younger siblings.
Oh.
So it probably was mostly the younger ones, because
he's done very, very well. Carlos is, he taught himself to become a great guitarist, because when he first started, he wasn't really the best musician in the band. It was Chapito Arrayas, who was the timbales player, and Chapito was the whole band was loaded with great musicians, and each of them brought a different angle to the band, and different like David Brown, the bass player, who grew up in the projects, and I think it was Hunters Point or Potrero Hill, and he brought the James Brown bass. And then Greg Raleigh, who started Santana with Carlos, he was a jazz organ player more than anything. He loved it, and so he brought that. And then he brought in Michael Shreves, who loved jazz too, so he was a great...
It's funny how a lot of people were on the organ in the late 60s. I know, like my friend, growing up, he wanted to start his own band, and he learned organ, and then he graduated to a Moog synthesizer, and then would still play the organ key on it, or the organ tones.
Was that guy?
No,
Okay.
it was a guy who never made it beyond. You're talking before about being an all-city star.
Oh.
He wasn't even ever an all-city star,
Oh.
but he wanted to be. But I mean, that was kind of what was in where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
That was what they were doing in the late 60s, the kids that wanted to be rock stars. But anyway, you know more about that than I do. I'm just throwing.
No, it's funny. I love the organ. The first time I heard Jimmy Smith do "Walk on the Wild Side," I went, "Oh boy!" I used to see him up at the Jazz Workshop up on Broadway Street. That's where they had great clubs up there. They had the Matador. That's where Brazil '65 started. And you go in there and you could see Jack Sheldon. You could see Mose Allison. You could see Vince Guaraldi. A lot played up there. He did "Cast Your Fate to the Wind." Cal Tjader. It was a great. It only had about 90 seats. And I used to go in there and I used to take some of the Warriors when they first moved out from Philadelphia. I'd take Wilt Chamberlain and I'd take Al Attles and Nate Thurman, and we'd
over to the club.
Yeah, to the club. It was a great club. It was a great time. Dave Brubeck was hanging around, going to clubs, and he was playing. We had a lot of great clubs in those days.
So what time frame was that?
That was in the '60s. Yeah. Early '70s.
Yeah.
But you go to Basin Street West, which was on one end of Broadway Street, and you could see the Temps or the Four Tops. You could see Ike and Tina Turner.
Well, you worked with them closely, right?
Yeah. I broke their first crossover record called "I've Been Loving You Too Long."
Yeah, that happens to everybody eventually. Maybe
well,
not.
they used to play there, and in their Proud Mary phase of their career.
Roland.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So a lot of the people that played in San Francisco also played in a couple of the clubs in Oakland too, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
What was the name of that club in Oakland?
Well, there was a lot of them.
There was one big one that everybody went to. Was it Keystone?
Well, the Keystone, there was a Keystone, yeah. That was owned by Freddie Herrera. Freddie had the Keystone in San Francisco, but that was on Broadway. And then Todd Barkin took it over and made it a really successful jazz club.
Yeah, because there's people from Vallejo that worked at that club. One guy was a bouncer. One guy, and he brought his little sister in, who I know now, and she was 13 years old when she started working there. She said that they used to, when they got raided, they used to make her hide. And she said, I can't tell you how many times I ended up in the closet.
Well, they had some great clubs. They had a club called the Black Hawk and another club called Fax, and they were in the Tenderloin. And those were the clubs. And that's where Oscar Peterson would play, Miles would play, and all when they filmed Bullet, I was in there the night that Steve McQueen came in. Very cool looking guy. Had a nice, really cool trench coat. He looked like a movie star. But
pretty.
That was when they'd had great musicians playing there. That was San Francisco was quite a spot.
Well, what's also so cool is that those places, if somebody famous would come into town, they knew they could just stop by and play.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
They come in and sit in. John Coltrane came into San Francisco. Just a lot of the great musicians would come. San Francisco was a mecca. And then, of course, when the explosion with the rock explosion in the late '60s, all the bands wanted to come to San Francisco because that was the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. You if you didn't make it in San Francisco, that was it.
Yeah. Well, as I said at the beginning of the show was only a moment, and it goes by faster than you think, and we only have about 2 minutes left.
No.
Yeah.
but I got a whole bunch of things I want to talk about.
Well, what is one or two of the ones you really want to cover?
Well, I was going to talk about promotions that I did.
Well, why don't we? You got time to tell me? At
Okay,
least?
I did a promotion. You see, it's very important when a record comes out that to promote it and come up with ideas. Well, the Bee Gees came into town. I took them up to Children's Hospital, and they sang Christmas carols just before they did the Saturday Night Fever. But probably the most successful promotion I did was with a woman named Millie Jackson. And Millie Jackson did an album called Feelin' Bitchy. So what I did was I rented an airplane for $190, and I had it fly over the Oakland Coliseum on Monday night. And Frank Gifford goes on TV, goes, "Who's Millie Jackson?"
Huh.
And in those days, you could fly over but Monday Night Football,
Yeah.
I mean, think of the ratings. And the next day, the record companies just said, "My God, the album everybody's asking for."
Who is that woman?
Right. So she went from 500,000 units, which she sold mostly to an African-American buyer, to all of a sudden she's getting played on pop stations, which she never did. And so she went from 500,000 up to 3 million in a matter of months.
Wow.
So all it takes is just,
So do you get your $190 back?
I got $50 from the record company.
Jeez.
And I handed him back the check and said, "Here, you need this more than I do."
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, that's pretty fascinating.
yeah. In fact, she came into town and we did a show at the Circle Star Theater with Ray Goodman and Brown and Roy Ayers. And I walked in there, Millie see me and she goes, "You must be Jeff Trager." Well, I was the only white guy in the place. And she goes, "Come here." I go into her dressing room and she gave me a big kiss and she says, "Thank you for what you did." And I went, "Thanks for that kiss."
Oh,
anyway,
cool.
those are just a couple of things that we did.
Yeah, well, I know that you and I kind of hit it off, and it'll be easy to do a whole series, and maybe we can we'll schedule you again sometime soon to finish your list.
Okay. Well, it's part of it,
Okay.
It's interesting stuff on there.
Well, I know, and I'm sure our viewers enjoy it too. So thanks for being here today.
Okay, my pleasure, Tom. Always.
Thanks. So that's all the time we have for today. Our show airs at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Comcast 27, AT&T UVerse 99, and streaming live video at vcat.tv. Come see us again next time.